Hello, welcome back to the Lacuna Writers Room. We are using the stream to build an epic setting. Need to figure out how to talk again after that 3 minutes of silence or of epic music, I should say.
Epic music. I love it every time I hear it. It's cool. It reminds me. It gives me Lord of the Rings vibes.
Yeah,
Like
it gets into your head too a little.
Yeah.
Like I find myself humming it sometimes.
Yeah, I feel like I should be doing something more epic than I am. Like sitting in my computer chair, I feel like I should be doing something a little more epic than that. You know?
Well, your mind is doing the epic stuff. That music was composed by Ryan Franks. The vocals were by Nina Story, and Ryan Franks actually joined this composition for hire website, and I found him sort of coincidentally. And this was his first project on that website, so he was really excited.
Oh wow! Did it? Yeah. Nailed it! It's pretty full. I love it. I think it's really beautiful.
It is. So Lacuna World is our website, lacunaworld.com. We're building a setting. The setting will be used in fiction, in games, in all kinds of ways, comic books, whatever we can do.
Audio
right
plays,
now we're just making it up.
Theater, short films, whatever. Yeah. Whatever art people want it. Paintings, sculptures, hey, whatever you got. Cross stitch, crochet, sure. Go for it.
I love it.
Macrame. Who does macrame anymore? Pick up macrame. Do a Lacuna macrame.
Remember those crafts where you used to melt down the little pieces of glass and put them into a frame and then cool it and then put it in the window?
Yeah. Do that. Let's have somebody do that. Yeah. Oh, now I'm gonna have the macrame people after me. Like, stop talking about us as if we're dead. We're here.
Right. We're working on, the structure of using this setting. I mean, right now the setting's in its infancy. We're still figuring it out. We've kind of worked out sort of the timeline, what we're dealing with. We're dealing with Atlanteans that were gods, and many of them are still, throughout history and society. We're figuring out some of the language so that we can know what to call the people and the places. And we're going to figure out some of the mechanics of the world. In other words, what magic is, monsters, what immortality looks like, things like that. But once we've kind of figured all of that out, and maybe a little bit of work on geography, then it's open for use. And I'm still working on the logistics of that, and I'm in no way ready to launch anything on this. But the general idea will be that anybody can write or create within the setting for their own benefit, commercial and otherwise. And it'll probably be structured under a Creative Commons or something like that. And we're going to have a setting Bible or a resource document that would have all of the things that make the setting. And then you can just use it. But then there's also going to be a channel where if you want your work to be canon, what's actually real in the setting as a canon, then there would be a separate process in which you would pitch your idea, and then the community would take it on, and then you would get some sort of profit share from that. So that's the vision. Danny and I are nowhere near publishing anything on it, but that's where we're heading. So so stay tuned. And if you want to be involved, go to our Discord, which you can find the link on lacunaworld.com. Go to our Discord and get to know. I mean, we're just getting started, so there's not a lot of people in there, but it's a good place to start thinking about what you want to do with Lacuna. It's your time to be able to provide feedback on some of the core setting elements. We're defining that right now. As Danny said in a prior session, this is the ground. This is the ground floor of building the setting. So if you have ideas and thoughts of what you would like this to go, now's the time.
Yeah. We've done our design brief. So that's there. So you can kind of see what it is, what it isn't, what are the truths of the world, all of that. And like you said, we did the timeline. And then we worked on a little bit of, the first one was the how, kind of the how it came about and the origins. And then we did the design brief, and then we did the timeline. And then last time we talked about language and nerded out about how language evolves and how we as humans use language. So yeah, and I've actually been looking at like a lot of Akkadian stuff, but for some reason my mind this week was just not comprehending what I was reading to put stuff together. I don't know why, because you know, it was almost like there was just some switch in my brain that wasn't switching. I don't know. But yeah, because we were talking about maybe coming up with a name for Atlantis. And then working on immortality, magic kind of world stuff. So how do you want to go about doing this today?
I think we just need to put our foot down on what the name is going to be. So I'd like to start with that. Okay. And I don't know, if this is going to be a long conversation or not. If it is a long conversation, then that's just what we'll do. Because we do need a pin in. For me, I can't think about the world in any sort of serious way unless it has a name. So this is psychologically for me, but also it will, I think, this is going to be the name that is going to be used all the time, potentially for years to come. This is our Middle Earth, so it has to be something that we don't want to reverse it if we don't have to. I mean, obviously,
right.
We should leave that open if something just doesn't work, but it has to be consistent with this design in terms of this proto Asiatic Semitic language core. But that is also cool sounding and doesn't sound too different to our ears. I mean, I think that is a little of an ethnocentric thing for me to say, but it does need to feel comfortable in the Western world, as that's our audience.
It has to have a good sound to it. Like most languages. So it has to say because the problem, as you say, with or you said last time with putting languages together, is you're kind of putting things together and you want to make sure that it sounds real, is what we were talking about. Like it sounds like a name that somebody would come up with. Okay. And the problem with some made up languages or some of these things that you see is they don't, because they have nothing behind them. But if you look at any language in the world, they all sound lovely to me. German, Polish, even English, even though we're, like I said, we run through, other people's languages for grammar and, mug them for consonants and do all this stuff. But still, English sounds to me good because it's my native language, but so do other languages. That's because they have roots and there's consistency to how they're put together, which is important. Right. So the problem with trying to come up with a name is that you don't want it to sound like you just took two things and put them together.
Right. And it does need to sound like it was organically created. That's a good point. Also, we are, for very valid reasons, choosing Semitic as our source. And that's, unusual for Western fantasy, if that's what this is. I don't think it should be categorized that way, but it will be. And that's
we
because
talked about that last time. For anybody watching or listening who doesn't know, we did extensively talk about what language we were going to base it on last time, and why we were doing that. So
and there's historical context for why it would be that it could be at least a cousin of that. And we're looking at Proto-Semitic, so this is sort of even before. Hebrew was well established by this time and when we're doing it, but like some of these languages, the Akkadian was just getting started, and we're starting a couple thousand years before that. So this is, language before language. There's that. And when you look at, not to nerd out more on language, but when you look at Proto, I mean, our English, our Proto is Proto-Indo-European, which houses a ridiculous amount of languages. But what you can see the core words in there, and whether it's German, Latin, English, even Indian, subcontinent Indian, all share the same roots, and so that's how big a proto language is. So it's not like just because we're picking on Akkadian is one of many in the Semitic family. and Afro-Asiatic, because we're getting into Egyptian, right?
Yeah.
So we're while we're using Akkadian as sort of a North Star, it's not really our language. So all that to say, what's different about this, according to other Western fantasy settings, is that this is going to sound very different to what we're used to. We're used to Tolkien, which was Indo-European. It was all mostly Nordic or German, or
Yep.
Our Tolkien Welsh, scholar can tell us more.
Welsh, yeah.
Yeah, and so that those words actually seem a little familiar to the Western audiences. And we're actually taking a completely different route. So the words are going to feel, in the English, the structure of the words are not going to feel as familiar to us as Western audiences. Eastern audiences will be like, and we're going to screw it up probably because of that. I mean, I only know the Latin languages. That's it. So English and a bit of Spanish. So anyway,
and we did talk about the reason why we're not because it is the language before language, and how is that? And we want it to have that vibe, but if it's not exactly the same, we're not too concerned about it, because it is just another version of what these languages became, right? So I mean, we're not doing it just to be dismissive and not do work, even though that helps, I guess. But it's also the fact that we're making something that has to feel a certain way, but not necessarily is that. Right. So
I also presented a challenge where I would love to see the link between the word Atlantis as rendered by the Greeks and the ancient name for Atlantis. And if there's some sort of correlation, that would be amazing. And that's a would be nice challenge. But it did direct my thinking when I went and looked at this closer. And also, just so as a community, we're crafting the rules of this language, but we're not crafting the language. And the reason is because we want, and we're using Akkadian as an inspiration point, but we're not going to create the language, because our stories, our media, our art is going to create the languages. We're not. Danny and I are not in the business of making languages. We're in the business of making architecture so that you can create the words you need when you need them, right?
Right.
So most of the time we're going to be talking about proper nouns, but maybe there's somebody that wants, an ancient Atlantean poem in their book, and they're actually going to have to make some words. They need the language as architecture in order to make the words.
Right.
So we are building that architecture.
And hey, maybe there's someone out there who's like, nah, I'm gonna make this language, and we'll be like, bully, go
make it.
Have at it.
Right.
Have at it. So you said you had a bunch of lists, though, of potential names that you had come up with. Since I failed my job, I was looking at it and I was just like, what are words? What are pieces of words? And I don't. Because
it's not fair, because
what you were talking about.
Right.
Because I'm an English speaker, so how to put some of this stuff together is not as familiar to me as it might be in something like French or Spanish or Italian, so.
Well, I do want to go over the architecture I worked on for the language first. I think the consonants and the vowels. So these are, again, kind of based on the root, what would have been common in this language family. So we have B, P, M, N, D, S, E, and the sh sound, and R and L, the soft G, the hard K, X has an H sound, but that's like a throat X, like a, and then J has a Y sound, because in the immortal words of Sean Connery.
But in the Latin alphabet, Jehovah begins with a Y.
Yes.
Look, I'm with you. I knew where you were going. I knew it.
Now, vowels are a little bit, again, this isn't etched in stone to use of Hun. I mean, this is this is a starting place.
In the movie, they literally were,
right? But it's a starting place, and I imagine this is going to evolve as we start building with this language architecture. So I'm going to put this in Discord so that we can use it, but it's a living document, and it's something that is subject to change. I did put vowels. Vowels are probably not written in our language because vowels often weren't. And I added some double vowels because that sounded fun. I don't know if they would be there or not, but there are. We have AE, we have AU, we have EA, EU. I think that that would make Atlantean sound a little bit mindful, demure.
Wow! Look at you with the slang and the hit TikTok terms.
With my pop culture relevance.
You got a kid, they keep you up to date.
I went to I made my kid dinner, and I assembled it nice on his plate, and I brought it into his room because he's a teenager now. He doesn't eat with us. And I brought it into his room, and I said, look how I arranged your plate. Look how mindful I'm being. Look how neat it is, how separated, how demure. And he's like, get out. Get out.
Just get out of my room. Get out. Just get out.
Our language is going to be very demure. We have VSO style, which means we do verbs, subject, object. Mm-hmm. Drive car to them. Mm-hmm. Which is an ancient kind of normal way of doing things. And then I wanted to do conjugation, and not to get too nerdy on this, but the idea is you add prefixes and suffixes in order to change the first, second, third person and in the progressive or whatever senses. So, and pronouns can be added in as modifiers. So there's going to be a root word, but then you add a bunch of words to it to make it in one statement what it is, right? And so I did some examples in here of what that would look like. So
I think, God, I'm trying to
pronouns
think
are the same
languages way. Do this other than, I mean, I think something like Nordic languages do this.
I think Akkadian does this. It's kind of a common thing for the older languages, because you would start with your kind of anger would be your word, right? But then you were like, I am angry. You would keep the anger word and then add to it to make it, to give it context. So I think it's kind of a common way of doing it in the old world, but don't quote me on that. And so an example, when I came up with some nouns and stuff, but an example of the way the Atlantean language would sound, if you were to say the queen sees the city, based on all the conjugations and everything, it would be Ilaren Nari Canis. So I actually created a sentence using this architecture, and I had to create a bunch of nouns and things, and I borrowed and stole those nouns and verbs from Akkadian.
In true English fashion. That's what we did.
I robbed and stole, colonized. I colonized the Akkadian language. But that's sort of. So I had
a good thing, but they're not around anymore. So I guess we're gonna go with that.
So that architecture is there, and we can keep working on it. But I needed that in order to come up with what I think the Atlantis.
Yeah, and in that sentence, I could hear a lot of Egyptian type.
Yes.
Sounds and stuff too, because. Believe it or not, I just watched The Mummy last night. I rewatched it. I love that movie. But in the beginning, I mean, we actually have, because of the Rosetta Stone and research, we have a pretty good idea of what ancient Egyptians sounded like.
Right.
And so in the beginning, when Imhotep and Anck-su-namun are talking, they are talking in Egyptian, and the pharaoh is, and you hear the way that sounds. That's going to be a lot of what this is going to sound like.
I agree.
And it's pretty. Yeah, I mean, it's neat.
It's the same root as Akkadian, and it's, it will sound like that. And it's true. I actually, not to make myself any more awesome than I already am, I did study ancient Egyptian for a little while.
Really?
And
Learning this.
I'm deeply, deeply interested in Egypt, in ancient Egypt, and I have been my entire life. I have studied the mythology relentlessly, and I wanted to learn the language a bit so that I could look at hieroglyphs and kind of get an idea of what, not only what they were saying, but why they were constructed. Because when I was a kid, the first exhibit of King Tut came through, or Ramses, sorry, the first Ramses exhibit came through, and into Denver in the 90s, and I lost my fucking mind. I couldn't believe it. Because at that time they were also touring with the Mask, which they didn't on their other tours, because that Mask was on its way to Cairo, where it is today. Yeah. But I got to see the Mask, and they had some pillars, and they had, I mean,
you mean there's something Egyptian actually in the Egyptian museum and not the British museum?
Believe it or not, what? Cairo ended up with that. Yeah. And it was formative. I think I must have been, I don't know, 10 or 11 maybe, when that exhibit came through, and it was formative. And ever since then, I have been obsessed with Egyptian everything. I even have a Khepri tattoo on my arm. You know, it's just it's a big deal to me. So I did learn. I kind of lost it. I bet I could go back to it and pick it up pretty quickly. But I did learn the hieroglyphs, at least to like an elementary level. And I could actually, you know, read tablets.
Nice.
And all that to say that, yes, this does sound Egyptian, and that's probably because of, you know, my prior,
it's the same
my prior nerdery.
Yeah, that's coming. Yeah, well, I mean, the story goes that were you a Greek mythology kid or an Egyptian mythology kid? Like, I was the Greek mythology kid, so
we're gonna make great partners then.
Yeah, that's what I was into. I have tattoos as well.
Yeah. And you have Greek mythology tattoos, right?
Yeah, I do. I have Hades and Hermes. So they're
the Khepri tattoo is it was kind of recent, but it was about, you know, I'd come through a big transition in my life, and I had I used it as, because the idea is that the beetle is pushing the sun up over the horizon after Ra had been warring with the serpent in the underworld all night. Yep. And there's a new dawn, and it was that kind of new dawn imagery was really important at that point in life. So it's really special to me. Yeah. And we are probably going to see a lot of Egyptian influencers in this, if I have anything to say about it.
There you go. And you do, actually.
I'm going to put up that's my text thread. Let's not do that. I'm gonna put up the I didn't open it yet. I'm going to put up the whiteboard. They do have some thoughts on this, and since you didn't do your homework, I am going to have a monopoly over this, I think.
I did.
I actually strong arm my way through.
I mean, it's hard when you're talking about a language that isn't around anymore and we know so little about, you know.
It is. It's not easy.
It's difficult.
So here I am. I'm looking for. Oh, here we go. This is what I'm looking for. I have started sharing my whiteboard.
So we have our timeline, language, and the design brief.
I'm going to call this Atlantis. What's in a name? So here we go. I'll tell you my thought process here. I found an Akkadian word that I liked called Adar. And I'm going to make a sticky note here so we can start taking notes. And Adar means for eternity.
And
it's so is for, and Dari is eternity.
Okay.
And one of the things I wanted to get past was, if we're going to use A, because it needs to, in my mind, resemble the word Atlantis, the first question I have is a really nerdy question. Are you ready for it?
I'm prepared.
Is A vowel, or is it a glottal stop? Fair question. It's a fair question. Because in antiquity, glottal stops were used like mayonnaise. They just spread their glottal stops all over the place.
Indeed.
And if you're wondering what a glottal stop is, it is that sound without a sound in between letters. So like that sound, that lack of sound between the word and o, that's a glottal stop. Your throat closes completely before the next sound goes out. Now, all of you English speakers out there, I want you to imagine that glottal stop at the start of a word and tell me how you pronounce it. I don't even know where to begin. There is a way to pronounce it, and it's by being real. It's by closing your larynx before you start the word. Right?
Huh.
So it would, instead of it would be That has a glottal stop at the start of the word If I didn't have a glottal stop, it would be but when I go then you have the glottal stop at the start of the word. So a lot of words in antiquity start with a glottal stop. It's often called aleph, and it's weird for English speakers. We don't do that.
Right.
So my first question is a in Adar a letter or a glottal stop? And in this case, I believe it's a letter, but it doesn't have to be. Glottal stops are very common, so we could make it a glottal stop. So, yeah,
that would be question. Like if it was a glottal stop, that would be like Adar. No,
it'd be Adar.
Adar. Yeah.
As opposed to Adar.
Adar. Yeah, as opposed to Adar.
It'd be Adar. The other consideration is okay. So by the way, I love the idea of Atlantis meaning eternity. That works in so many ways. Right. The immortality is our core theme. So, boom, that's just beautiful. So I really hooked into that word, and I was thinking, okay, well, how does it become? Well, first of all, Adar or Adar, depending on how we wanted to use it, would means for eternity. So what does it mean when you say the land of eternity, which would be the region, and the city of eternity, which would be the city, right? That's when you can start getting into conjugation.
Right.
So here's what I was thinking.
Okay.
You take it's really Adari is the core words, right? So we're gonna go for if it's the land. We're going to conjugate Ari and make it LA. Adala, as opposed to Adari or Adar. Adala means Adari, but the land of.
The land of.
Conjugating. We're dropping the R and I. We're adding an L and A. And LA in our language would mean land. This is an idea. I'm also trying to make it sound like Atlantis. So this is why I'm choosing these letters. And then if we made it a city... Well, La is for land. What if Linus is for city? So, Adalinis. Now, here is the coup de grace. There is a thing called consonant shifting that happens over time with languages. This is what I was looking up before the stream was starting. I just wanted to double check this. It happened in German, for sure, but it's happened in other languages too, where the language starts with the D sound, and that D sound becomes a T sound over time. And it's because consonants at the front of your mouth are harder to do than consonants in the back of your mouth. And so what happens when you're fluent in a language that after a long time, you stop saying those consonants as hard. And so Adalinus could easily become, over time, over thousands of years, Adalinus, Atlantis, right? You can see how it would work that way by the time it gets to the Greek. And this is, you can see it in real time. Like in LA, there's this whole TikTok trend about how LA people don't pronounce their T's. And I was thinking that can't be true. And I was thinking about it as no, we don't. We don't say Santa Monica. We say Santa Monica. Santa Monica. We're actually losing the T
Santa
altogether
Monica.
because N is easier to say than T. So we just kind of bulldoze over the T. It's the same thing with D to T and then T to N. So, Santa Monica. You don't even hear the T when I say Santa Monica.
Right.
It sounds like kind of a sharp N. So but that's what's happening here. So you can see how Atlantis would eventually become Atlantis.
I like that. I do. And what I would say is like Adala is the land itself, and there's a capital city that's Atlantis.
Yes, right. Yeah, that's what I'm thinking too. That's exactly what I'm thinking. And there are other variants to this. And we don't have to do it straight up like that. It could be Adali, Adalinus. It could be, I love the spell checks trying to like, what are you doing? We could add the double vowels if we wanted to. Adali, which is an A-E-D-A-L-I. I mean, there's some variations here too. And I think that we can make it 2 Ds if we wanted, which is more like Adar, right? So it could be Linus. But there's a lot of options with that round of thinking.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah. And now, I honestly, I think looking at this list, I mean, I think I do like.
Try to make it bigger. I'm making it bigger for those of you who are watching.
Yeah. And Adali would be the land, right?
Yeah.
Be the land. Adali. I like Adela personally.
Ooh.
Because it sort of sounds like Nirvana.
Yeah.
It kind of sounds a little like heavenly place to me, and in the connotation of the sound of the words. It kind of sounds like Nirvana, Adali.
And a version of that for the city is Adalanus.
Adalanus. I like that.
As opposed to Adalinus.
Yeah, no, I like that. Yeah. Adalanus. Yeah. I like that.
Yeah, I think this is it. I mean, it was a exciting thing to see the word Adar because that was like close enough. There's a lot we can do with that.
Yeah.
And this gives us some early proper noun structure. So if it's a city, using the word Lanus or Anus. If it's a region, using the word Allah or La. It doesn't have to be used that way, but if we know, for example, let's say the city of death is Mort, which it always is, right?
Right.
Mortala would be the region of death, right?
Yeah.
Or Mortanus would be the city of death.
Mortanus,
this is an example. Yeah. So we'd come up with root words that you can just have. I mean, it would be boring if every city used that, but it would be common.
Right.
And so we'd want to come up with words for like place.
Stephanie. What's that?
We want to come up with words for like place, valley, people, so that you can use things other than the word city.
Right. Yeah.
Well, if anybody's watching, tell us what you think.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think the
Adalanus. Yeah, and even that even sounds it rather than having Adalanus, which was like the first one up there, or right under Adala. Adalanus sounds more like Atlantis.
Yeah.
In my opinion. Adalanus. Atlantis.
So, all right. I think it's a winner.
Yeah.
Are we okay with it? If this goes on for 20 years and then, Chris Pine is in it and it's a movie, are we okay with hearing the words Atlantis a lot?
Yeah. Yeah.
I like it.
But of course, and it's like if it does, Sauron went in there and changed the name of that land that he took over and named it Mordor of all things. So places can have like more than one name via history, or someone else comes in if ever we do decide. But this would be like the original name. Right. This would be like what it was called. And then if other people in other languages, I mean, all I can think of is the scene in Star Trek where they're going to the planet that has, Eden, and they have all the different races there. And there's, Shangri-La, and they're all saying what that word is in their language. That's the sort of thing that can happen,
Sure.
Because they're going to run into other people. And so, this would be what they call it and whatnot, but maybe somebody took over, whatever. So even though this is what we're going to stick with, and I like it, and I think it's going to last a long time, we're still not beholden to it.
Right.
And we can come up with plenty of story reasons why somebody might call it something else.
Sure. But it's the original word for it, and it would naturally lend itself into be calling Atlantis with later languages.
Right. Right. Yeah.
And it's cool. It's not a glottal stop, so that's
nah.
I mean, if we wanted to be pretentious, we could make it a glottal stop and spell it with an apostrophe.
I mean, remember how I was talking about class last time? You'd always have it that a certain class of these people use the glottal stop.
Oh yeah,
and some of them did not, and so therefore,
it says you're so beneath me because you are not using the aleph
yes, exactly.
in the way that the language was intended.
Yeah,
your coarse tongue is very bristling.
Exactly. See.
Yeah.
You'd have lots of fun with that.
Oh yeah. The elders use the glottal stop.
Yeah, elders use the glottal stop.
And then the young ones are lazy and make it an A sound.
I mean, I even have an example of my name, and I don't even have my name. The way I pronounce it is Delisle, right? Delisle, Delisle. It is an Americanized version of a French name. If I went over to France or some other French-speaking place, and they looked at my last name, they would not say Danielle Delisle.
What would
they say? Danielle Delisle. Danielle Delisle.
It does sound pretty good.
Delisle? Yeah.
If you say it in the way that you said it just now. Like if you say it with an American accent, it sounds terrible.
Thank you. I've had that name my whole life, but thank you for that.
But the French version, beautiful.
Yeah, exactly. My name actually means of the island in French. Yeah. So there you go. And I had some nobility back there because of the D-E and the L, like only nobility could be of the something. So there you go. So bet you didn't know you were talking to nobility? Royalty or whatever.
I mean, the Greys are noble, but they lost their heads.
Oh no!
Probably Lady Jane Grey.
Yeah. Oh, really? Are you part of that Grey line?
Well, Grey is not mine. Grey is my quote unquote stage name. It's my author name, but it is a family name that comes from my wife, and her name. Everybody says they're related to Lady Jane Grey, but she says you can't swing a dead cat in England and not run into somebody that's related to Lady Jane Grey. So
there you go. But all my point is that even my own name in modern times gets pronounced differently depending on who's looking at it and trying to pronounce it. So the fact that, the elders and the young ones would pronounce it differently is not that far off, and even gives the world a little bit of personality.
Yeah.
Like the elders speak with the glottal stop, and the young ones were like, nah.
They talk like Texans.
We're not doing that.
Beautiful. All right, cool. So I think we have our name for Atlantis.
I like it. I think it's pretty.
Adala's great, and
like I say, it sounds like Nirvana, or Shangri-La. Adala, Shangri-La, Nirvana. It sounds like a, heavenly place. So, which is kind of what we're going for. And I think Nathan is right that there is a precedent for that in Scottish as well. Bali, Glen, Loch, etc. For naming stuff. So
and like I said, there's Bali, Glen, Loch. Yeah.
Well, there's me. That's an old picture. It's very old. Much younger then. But yeah, that's true.
Right. And then, Nathan might be able to help with this, but there is, oh boy, I might mess this up. Just give me a moment. But okay. So, I've lost it. That you can tell by the names of British towns what the people were called.
Oh,
and it's in Alban. I really wish I could remember this because it's really great linguistics trivia, and I've completely blanked out any examples, so I might just have to move on. But I know there's like a place in England that's called Hill about 6 different ways because of all the different variations of the word hill. But there's also you can tell like with I kind of remember like, okay, the name Washington means people of Wales in a town. So it was a town full of Welsh people is what Washington means. So it's like the ing means people of, ton means town, and wash was a way of saying Welsh. So you could actually look at town names or city names or people names and understand the source of them because they used ing on everything, or ton, or a combination of them. That's the only example I can think of, but there's probably others. Nathan seems like the type of person who knows all this stuff, so maybe he'll.
Yeah. I mean, we do that too. I mean, Vermont, my home state, is Green Mountains in French. You find Green Mountains there. That's the state.
So you have Vermont Green Mountains.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We are Vermont Green.
Right, that makes sense. Vermont. Right. Yeah. Oh my God.
And we have Green Mountains.
It also reminds me of Nova Scotia, meaning New Scotland.
Scotland. Yeah.
What? But when you know the history, it makes sense.
I mean, we do New York and New Jersey, all that stuff too. So sometimes
Nathan says he does not know about this. So
sorry.
Thanks for your help, buddy.
I'm sure he's going to look it up, though. He's going to look it up.
I wish I could remember other examples, but anyway, it doesn't matter. So anyway, so we have our name. That's the one thing I wanted to accomplish. Now we kind of need to fill in the blanks on the mechanics of our world. There are a couple of unanswered questions, and I do think we need to be careful because if we answer too many of them, that takes away agency for storytelling later.
Right.
So I don't want to get in a position where we're just defining the history of Adala over the years, right? I want to look at, but the structural stuff we have to know. And maybe big moments we have to know. Part of me thinks that we should probably figure out what the cataclysm is.
Yes.
Otherwise, there's going to be a random story down the road that'll tell us what it is. But it seems like a big enough deal that it probably should be defined. At least in the abstract. Well, it is defined in the abstract, but it needs to be kind of like, this is what happened.
Well, we don't have to do all the details, but we can decide, was it a meteor? Was it an earthquake? Was it a flood? Was it,
was it only one? There may have been more than one.
Right. I think one thing that we had talked about was that there was a civil war.
Right.
So we know that that's a thing that happened. Maybe pull up the timeline.
Yes.
And we can look at that and try to figure it out.
So do we want to look at the timeline and then figure out what the cataclysm? We also need to figure out the nature of immortality. But I think we all want to know what the nature of immortality is. I think that's
right.
A good exercise in a general kind of way.
So we have here, this idea that we came up with of a war that was going on. So we have the start of civilization at 3500 BC. Between 3500 and 1200, in between or lesser Atlantic influence on outer cultures. Like they're not out there, but they are occasionally have meetups with other cultures and stuff happens, but not real huge. And then in the 1200, Bronze Age collapse culminates with Trojan War. And then in Adala, we have drama between elder and younger gods over the topics of mortals.
So that would have been in the 3500 to 1200 era.
Yeah. Bronze Age is booming, and so Atlantis have conflict over what to do about it. And then in 1250, we have the Cataclysm, which sank the continent in order to hide traditions and lore and stuff. There was stuff they felt like mortals should not get a hold of, and stuff.
And this was a result of the Civil War.
Yeah, this was a result of the Civil War. So, yeah, what would they do? What sort of stuff would they have access to, or what would have happened?
I mean, I think it's a weapon of mass destruction. I mean, it's got to be, right?
Right.
What else would it be?
Right. But what did this weapon do?
Well, I think we also need to backtrack is what are they capable of? And what technology do they have access to? So I do not want to get, I just got to say, I do not want to get into the idea of, I need to remember the new name now, but I don't want to get the idea of Atlanteans having, space age technology.
Right.
It's submarines and shit like that. It's hard for me to suspend my disbelief when we're dealing with pre-Bronze Age and they have like laser blasters and whatever. So I definitely don't want to go that direction. If you follow Edgar Cayce, who is the sleeping psychic, he's the one that prophesied a bunch of stuff, including a whole bunch of information about Atlantis. Now, obviously, I don't know if any of that's true or real, but it's great for us storytellers trying to mine ideas that have some sort of authenticity around it. But he talked about crystal technology. And earth seismic kinds of technology. That's interesting to me.
Yeah.
There's also, just like magic, old school magic. What I mean by magic, I mean like hermetic magic, the kind that was in mystery schools throughout the Egyptian and Greek eras, where you would have phenomenal cosmic power,
Hebrew, like the Kabbalah.
Yeah, right. Like in the the Kabbalah from the Hebrew tradition. And where you're actually using a system of magic that can affect reality. So that's available to us, I think. What else? They have, there's the question of the powers of gods, which I'm reluctant, but I'd like to hear your thoughts on that.
Well, here's my thought. Just from a storytelling point of view. My thought is, if all you have to be a god is that you're immortal, you're not really a god. You're an immortal, right? So, in my opinion, just you're the Highlander. You're not a god. You're just an immortal. So I do feel like that the gods do have some ability that will then give them, kind of what they have provenance over, in my opinion, I think that would be the funnest to work with. I think it gives people a chance to kind of flare off of it. And then my idea is, they're gods, they have certain, and we can talk about if we feel like it's necessary to talk about how they got their powers or not. But I think for the kids, the ones that start out mortal and then become gods, or, their children, whatever trials they have to go through is what ends up giving them their powers, based on their experience of, based on their experience in the trials and their personality traits and whatnot. They get their abilities that way, All
right. So we know that elders naturally have the powers, and
right.
we know that descendants.
Yeah. Get it through the trials.
Get powers through trial. Well, that's with an A probably. Descendants get powers through trials. Okay. So I'm answering the questions for those of you who aren't watching but are listening. Well, what are gods? My initial thought on this was that the elders descended to the mortal realm for parentheses reasons.
Okay.
It could be interpreted that they were aliens that went to Earth, but I actually think I would like to see it be more like, if science was looking at it, it would say, no, these were from another dimension altogether, and limited their consciousness to our plane.
Like a plane of existence,
right?
Plane of existence.
And they just limited their consciousness, and then ended up, manifesting in the physical realm.
So it's kind of like Superman in a way. Like on their planet, they're not really that special, but here, the yellow sun gives them powers,
right,
whatever it is.
Right.
Or whatever it is. So there's two ways you can do that. So I'm totally cool with the other plane or other dimension, and like various mortal scientists can argue about it, right?
Sure.
Oh, it's another place, right? Yeah. They can argue, no, it's another plane, it's another dimension, and here's the difference, and blah, 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 blah. You know what I mean?
Right,
they can have fun with that, But I think all we need to define is say it's not another planet. It's another plane of existence or another dimension. And I think we can kind of leave it at that for the writers. And then the other
and they have a word for it, probably,
they have a word
heaven.
for it. Yeah.
I'm going to put heaven in quotation marks,
Right. This is where we came from.
Other existence.
So now the other question is, elders naturally have powers. Okay. So there's two ways that can go. We can go the Superman route, and that they aren't really extraordinary where they're from. But when they moved here, for whatever reason, that makes them, have these abilities. Or whatever the process was to move here changed them in some way, a la the Fantastic Four.
Right.
And now all of a sudden they have to deal with having these abilities. To me, the second option is more fun, because then you have all these people with powers that they're not exactly comfortable with, and like.
I'm remembering that the Inhumans, when they go into when they're kids, they have to go through the field, the special, whatever it is, some sort of radiation field. And then they either die or they come out with a power and they're inhuman.
Right.
Now.
Right. Yeah.
Or they're basically mutants.
That would be like for the descendants to unlock their whatever.
Right.
And that's something that even Superman, since he was from another planet, he had to deal with, but that's because he was a kid, right? And he had to learn how to do things normally. But the thing is like, if you're born with it and it's natural to like fly on their, let's just use flying as an example. Like say on their planet, everybody flies, or their dimension, I was thinking planet because I was thinking Superman, but in their dimension, everybody flies. It's just a thing, nobody thinks of it. Hey, want to go flying for our date Friday night? Sure, let's go. And they just do it. It's a nothing. It's a like walking or breathing. It's just what they do. And then they come here, right? And all of a sudden it's not, right? that's a very different thing. It's two different attitudes. It's having to realize something you thought was normal or is the majority where you're from is not a majority, and how you handle that versus I could never fly before and now I can fly. Those are two very different attitudes. And I think whatever we pick, I think we need to pick one of those or a third option if I haven't come up with all the options, because that is very much going to color, I think, the attitudes of the elders and the children personally.
There's an argument to be made that the elders are naturally, and if you look at antiquity and mythology, this is consistent, that they're naturally comfortable in their all-powerful skins. That it's the descendants of the kids are the ones that are rambunctious, unpredictable, overthrowing them and all kinds of stuff. So, okay. I mean, maybe it's both. Like the elders. Okay, well, look at it this way: you're a pan-dimensional being, if we can imagine what it would be like.
And I'm there. I mean, I have something to tell you, Chris.
You're pan?
I am, as a matter of fact.
So you know what this is like then. When you limit your consciousness in order to interact with another plane, it doesn't mean you've lost who you are. It just means that there are constraints now.
Right.
So, even with constraints, though, you are who you are. So I think that while, in the higher realm, let's just look at dimensions. I'm going to get a little mathematical here, if you don't mind me nerding out just a little bit more.
Go ahead.
I've already ruined my reputation on this stream, so.
We're already outed ourselves.
Now, let's look at it mathematically. There's this really great book called Flatland. It's an old book. It's free. You can get it. Just download it. And it's a mathematical understanding dimensions book. But in Flatland, you follow the story of a square who doesn't know that they're a square because the square can only see things first dimensionally. And so or it can only see things second dimensionally. So according to the square can only see other lines, even though those lines are actually circles and other squares. And sometimes you can see, lines that fade off from a point, and those are triangles. So they're looking at it second dimensionally. Mm-hmm. Well, a circle comes and meets this square, and when the square looks at the circle, it just sees a line. But the line can shrink and grow at will. And the square is like, what are you doing? And the line says, I'm just moving up and down. I'm a sphere. And so, when you look at it sideways, the square is looking at the sphere going up and down. And to the square, it looks like it's shrinking and growing, but really it's just moving up and down. Mm-hmm. And so the square learns how to move up and down and can see now third dimensionally. Mm-hmm. And starts... So anyway, it's a really, really great book. I'm trying to understand dimensions, but my overall point on this, when you look at the world, when you look at what science and math says about fourth dimension, it's often correlated to time, and it's just because in the fourth dimension it doesn't take time to go distance, so time is no longer a function of the environment; it is the environment. Mm-hmm. And there's a whole lot of physics and stuff that go into explaining what that means. But when you are a fourth dimensional entity, you're actually limiting yourself to see things third dimensionally. You're a square that's only seeing lines, but you're still a square. And so if that's what happened, and these are fourth dimensional creatures that have manifested third dimensionally, they still have all of what it means to be fourth dimensional, but their progeny wouldn't, because they're just physical creatures in the third dimensional consciousness. And so the trials are about like opening yourself back up to the fourth dimension. If I was looking at this mathematically, right? So that way, I mean, the elders would have a lot of inherent power.
Right. So their experience was So their experience was, we're elders, we're in our dimension, and we're flying around, and we're making lightning, and we're doing all this stuff, and that's just what we do because we're in our own dimension. And then they come here for whatever reason, which we might want to talk about.
Yeah.
And now we realize that everyone here in this place is not at that. So we have to navigate what we know and what we can do in this space. And then the kids are like, hey, we just know this third dimension, but now we're going to have the ability to see in this other dimension and do stuff from this other dimension because we learn about it. And what does that do to them? You know, like, oh, all of a sudden now I can fly, or now I can, you know, charm people with my looks, or whatever it is they happen to come through with, you know. Yeah, I think that makes sense. And then that can be another instance of elders and their children butting heads.
Right. Yeah, and that's I think that works. And they don't have the language for dimension. That's not probably how they see it. But you know, if you're looking at it with physics in mind or math, then that's what it is. However, they would call it, you know, and it's probably something that they can retreat to and come back from. And I imagine that the limiting of yourself to become third dimensional is probably not fun. Right. It's probably highly constraining, and it's maybe hard to go back and forth, but you probably could.
Right.
And it's like when you're in a video game and your character gets killed. I mean, you can get back into the video game, but it sucks.
Right.
Right.
You're like, I have to do this whole level over? What the hell?
Right.
God damn it. So I think that's a good explanation. So I think the two questions we have now are, what might we call that dimension? And I'm not saying we need to answer these now, but I'm saying two questions we have right now. What do they call this other dimension? And two, why are they limiting themselves, or why did they choose to come here?
Yeah, let's note that, come back to it, and first look at the powers. So we initially said that there's a couple of ways: God powers, crystal magic, or hermetic magic. Of all of these, crystal magic is the one that is too... Well, that's the easy answer. That's okay, well, there's powers and crystals that we can use and exploit. And I kind of don't want to take the easy way, but it's there if we want it. But hermetic magic is all about mapping reality. Ultimately, that's what Kabbalah is. That's what a lot of these Western mysticism cults were about. Is about mapping reality. And so hermetic magic makes a lot of sense as a primary tool that you would use in the third dimension in order to access fourth dimensional stuff. And you know, if you're able to do it in we're saying through a trial, you sort of, and a trial makes sense because you can't just think your way through a hermetic map. You actually have to go through it. And there's often in the mystery schools, there was a tradition of dying and being born again, a retelling of the Christ story, a retelling of a lot of other Horus. And so, you know, you would literally die in order to experience the afterlife and then come back. So in a way, you're becoming fourth dimensional and descending just like the elders. And that's how you get your immortality.
Yeah. Oh, man. I really wish, if you've never read Zelazny and his Princess of Amber series.
Oh, you've mentioned it before. Yeah, I should.
Because this stuff and the way they're getting their powers, whenever we've talked about it, reminds me heavily of Princess of Amber. They literally would have to walk what they called the maze or the labyrinth to come into their adulthood like abilities. And it was super difficult. And it wasn't huge. Like, they would be in this little room and they would start walking, and you could sit there on the edge of the room and watch them do this. But it was difficult because it was buffeting your mind and buffeting your body the whole time you were walking. And the idea was to get to the center, to bind yourself. I'd have to read them again to see it, like the exact setup, but that's kind of what you're talking about. And there's a very similar pagan ceremony that I took part in, which was called Walking the Labyrinth. And essentially it was sort of a mortality contemplation exercise where you walk there and contemplate your journey into death as you walk the labyrinth. And when you get to the center, you shed your old self, and then you walk out as a new person.
Right. And the Egyptians did this with the opening of the mouth ceremony and the in the Egyptian Book of the Dead. But the idea is that you would go through these trials, and they were trials, and it was always, every king had a different set of them, but there were like 52 trials or something like that. They would go through on their way to the afterlife, and it was Anubis was guiding you there, and then eventually you would get past the trials, and then you would get your heart weighed, and then you could go into the field of reeds. But there were all of these points about shedding the old life and then coming into a new, and that was reiterated in the mystery schools. It started with the Isis schools, and then the I want to say Persephone. It might be. There was a Greek tradition.
Mm-hmm.
I can't remember what it was called, and then there was a Greco-Egyptian tradition,
right?
And then the Elysian mysteries. That's what that was, and then that moved into the modern moved into the modern occult with all of the Golden Dawn.
And then in our world, we can say, well, they probably got some of that from the
Atlantis. Exactly.
Right, yeah.
And the story of the Minotaur and the labyrinth, that's a retelling of these trials.
Somebody's journey. Yeah. Somebody's journey. And I like the idea of it. Like I said the last time, all I kind of really want to make sure of is that whatever we say about these trials is, I feel like they should be personalized, and how you come out of it is different for everybody. Because to me, I find that makes an interesting story. Maybe they have some classic trials, or whatever, or maybe there is like one ceremony, but basically what that ceremony does is tell you what your trial is to be, or where you're supposed to go, or it gives you a riddle of some kind to figure out your trial, or something like that. You have to go to this piece that they brought back from the other dimension, and that will kind of tell you, or it's one of those things where you just, you step through it, and whatever's on the other side is what you have to deal with, and it's different for everybody.
Yeah, I think it's how's this? I mean, it really, we're talking about the death rebirth mystery schools, which is really, really common in antiquity and really, really common in modern occult. And everybody has a different way of doing it. But the reason it makes sense in our context is because you actually do have to die. You have to shed your third dimensional body, become fourth dimensional, and then descend back. And then that new form, that's what you're talking about. It's different for everybody. The process of death and rebirth is going to be different for everybody, and how you return to the world is going to be different for everybody.
Right.
But the core mechanics are, you have to die and then descend again.
Right.
I mean, hell, the story was talked about in Christianity with Jesus, dying and coming back.
Right.
Renewed.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? And there's stories all over the place, and I don't mean to reduce Christianity down to this, but I mean, when you look at mythology and the death rebirth cycles, it's always the same story.
Right.
And that's because the Atlanteans did this in order to become immortal.
Well, I don't think it's necessarily reducing Christianity, because I think one topic that I'll just mention briefly that we sometimes forget when we say mythology is that there was a time when people believed this. Just because they don't anymore doesn't mean it wasn't very, very real to them, And so any religions that we have in the world today are of the same sort of what we call mythology, in terms of, why do we have it? Why do we follow it? Why do we do this, that, and the other thing? Because it still is religion. Mythology, at one point, people very much believed in those things. People still do. I'm pagan. Okay. So you can't tell me, it's like, yes, but it's a dead religion. I'm still here. Sometimes I can still hear their voices. I'm not dead. Stop telling people I'm dead.
I'm not dead yet.
I'm not dead. So I don't think it's diminishing. I think it's talking about how Christianity, as point of fact, still falls into the kind of story explanation rituals that most other mythologies and religions do. The only difference between mythology and religion really is that, one's practiced more than the other, in all honesty, right now, or not. Some have gone extinct, but I'm sure. But
and for those of you that are listening, I mean, I just so you know where I'm coming from, I'm agnostic. So I actually, this is difficult for me in order to make sure I'm not stepping on belief, because I have very strong belief that I don't know.
Yeah.
And so I am very open to religions, but I don't look at religions in the same way that religious people look at religions. I tend to look at religions very academically. So if you hear me talking about your faith, particularly Judaism and Christianity, because of the ones I know the most about, then, understand that I'm looking at it from a secular academic point of view and not from a religious one. So
right,
it'll come up in this because there's obviously a lot of connections.
Oh, no worries. And I was just making a statement about that because I'm an anthropologist too. I'm pagan and an anthropologist. So I see how religions are looked at from a cultural perspective and what their purpose is in culture and why we humans are drawn to them, because we've studied culture and how religions are a big part of culture. So I have that academic side, as well as, my belief side. And while we're talking about it, I mean, mine is more like I have very heavy beliefs, but I'm a big believer in that your structure for faith isn't so much what you're getting out of it. Like I could have picked any, honestly, and followed it and followed the morals and stuff like that and whatever. But this is kind of the one that I was drawn to. And I still believe it. And I feel like sometimes when people say that, so you don't really believe, you just picked one you liked more because of looks. And it's just because of how I feel about religion and how we use it as humans and belief systems. And the thing is, we think we might be getting off topic, but it really has to do with a lot of what we're talking about, because we're talking about gods and how they act and what we perceive as gods and what they are actually. And I've always felt like religions and all of that stuff, from the time we started having religions, from the time a caveman looked up at the moon and wondered what that thing was, we want to explain and we want to have an explanation and we want to be able to come to terms with our own mortality, because no one here is getting out alive. That's the sad truth of it. Like at one point, we're all going to be gone. And that's a little heavy for a writer's workshop stream, but.
Well, these are the themes. I mean, our theme is immortality, and it's, I think there's a lot in religion about immortality, and for the reasons that you say, it's because we don't want to be mortal.
Yeah.
But this is a good segue because, well, why can't humans do this? Or when they do, things go badly.
Right.
Because one of the stories I want to tell is about how one of the elders decides that he wants to bring a mortal, for reasons, through the trials so that this mortal can become immortal. This is not a descendant. This is just a normal person.
Your hot reasons. You're hot, and I don't want you to die.
I think it's a political reason, because they in the Civil War, this elder wants somebody in the mortal world to have like a permanent allegiance to him and to build armies, basically. So it's a political reason. And I think that this is sort of taboo. You don't do it. You don't do it. I would like to know why. What happens when a mortal, and here's where I think we can have fun with monsters, is what happens when a mortal does the trial. They ascend and then they descend, but do they descend as,
monsters,
the person that they left as, or are they a monster now? I think this can be the source of vampires, werewolves, hydras. I don't know. What do you think?
Minotaurs. No, I love it. I think you can leave it open. If a mortal does it, they could just die.
Yeah.
They never come back.
They're not able to descend.
They die. Right. But those that do make it through, come back changed. And you can even leave it so that maybe there's a percentage that actually do ascend. Maybe. Yeah. But if they don't, they come back changed and not for the better.
Right.
somehow, not necessarily. And I think the reason for that is if we're talking about transdimensional beings or parallel universes or whatever, the reason being is that we're in this dimension that we're in as mortals, as humans, right? We don't have the DNA, the genes, the wherewithal in the beginning to contemplate and understand and embrace what that knowledge would entail. People who are descendants are way more likely to do that because they have that in them that they can unlock, right? We don't, right? So you're putting it through, you're taking a chance, you're gambling, you're going to die, which I would say a huge percentage might, and then there's a smaller percentage that come through horribly, they're monsters or, they in any kind of way. You can leave that open into interpretation. Is that where serial killers come from? Is that where Hitler came from?
Right.
Like, what? You can just go wild with that. What does that mean? Change, not for the better. Are you a Minotaur? Are you a Hydra? Are you turned into an inanimate object? Do you come a psychopath? What happens? We can leave that up to the writers and just say it's negative for a percentage that come through. And then some smaller percentage than that, maybe actually to ascend, And you could even say that maybe some humans who died, quote unquote, maybe didn't die, but were actually able to ascend. Like, hey, maybe Einstein didn't die. Maybe he had actually ascended somehow. Maybe he's one of the few humans. Who knows?
Well, there's texts about that. The was it Elijah or Elisha? I get them mixed up. That went up in a chariot, and ascended. We see that in holy texts all the time, where so and so ascended.
Right.
One story I want to tell is the first vampire. This is borrowing and stealing from pretty well-known pop culture, so this isn't anything new or exciting, but the idea of Adam's first wife, Lilith,
right,
having found the keys to immortality and then leaving Eden, I think is all stuff that happens on Atlantis. In that what she discovers, what she heard in this model, her descending became like this, bloodthirsty vampire who then created the race of vampires, right?
Right.
And there's and then there's Adam and Eve themselves being offered the chance to ascend,
right,
and then taking it, and that's what gets them kicked out of Eden, right? And whatever that allegory means in the gritty, realistic version of Atlantis that we're going to create. But those are stories that make sense in this architecture,
right,
and can be told. Yeah.
And I think leaving it open to it is most of the time, like 99% of the time, bad for a mortal to go through it. Either they die or they come out awful, but there's a small 1% chance or 0.5 or 99.99% chance that they come through it actually ascended. I think having it be that for the trials just lends a lot to what stories you can do. And leaving it open, do they come out looking monstrous, or are they just monstrous on the inside, or do they ascend, or do they just die? I mean, that leaves a whole wide variety of stories you can have. A love story between a descendant and a mortal, when the descendant says, "Yeah, I'm going to sneak you in there, and you can do it, and you'll ascend, and we'll be together forever," and believing that their person is going to come through it, and they don't. They just die. Or they come out awful, or whatever, or if they do come through, they come out awful, and now this person doesn't want anything to do with them anymore. Like, what do you do with that? Are you prepared for those consequences when that happens? So there's tons of stories if you kind of just leave it on. Here are your options: small part ascend. Bigger percentage come out awful, but 90% of them just die, and you can do cool stuff with all three of those,
I think that answers most of the questions that I would have about the setting. I mean, knowing the architecture of how the reality works, explains almost everything. So if it's magic, it's hermetic magic because you're drawing maps to fourth dimensional access.
Right.
If it's and that, I think there could be mystical magic too, but for the same reason. The difference is in Kabbalah they talk about the difference between wisdom and knowledge, and as both access to the divine. Where knowledge is where you study your way into understanding the divine, and that would be the hermetic mapping path. Or if you play D&D, that's the wizard, right?
Or the Tremere and freaking vampire, if you're into that.
But wisdom is something that where you achieve understanding, but without knowledge. So it's like, love is a form of wisdom. I understand love, but I could never learn what that is, right? Or if you look at a beautiful painting and you just suddenly get truth from it, sort of an indistinguishable truth, that's wisdom. So that would be more of the mysticism stuff. So instead of hermetic mapping, what you're doing is, dancing around a bonfire or whatever, but it's still channeling fourth dimensional access, and that's the sorcerer in D&D,
right?
And what did Nathan say? Oh, the bloodlines of mortals. Okay, so Nathan asks, can you comment on bloodlines among the mortals who may have younger god in their ancestry? I think this is something we need to be very careful about. Is one of the things I want to avoid is some bloodlines are better than others. I do think that it would be totally logical for gods to have babies with mortals. And it might mean that they have better access to these trials, and they might have a better chance of surviving a trial. But I don't think that we should go down the route of them being any better or worse than any other mortal.
Yeah, I don't know as if he's saying that. I think he just wants to wonder of like who we think might have had, if we look at history, like who might have had a god in their bloodline.
I think people with unusual access to money and resources and power.
There you go.
Because I imagine that in the modern day, if this is true, that the gods that remain are probably very selective about who they bring into immortality. And because of drama, I mean, the fewer gods there are, the less drama there is, and the more control they can have over mortals. So they're not going to want very many. What are you talking about?
The Greek gods were totally drama. There was nothing. There was nothing going on. Like,
so if somebody
wasn't, and
so if somebody was a descendant from a god in one way or another, but wasn't like one of the direct descendants, I bet they're being watched. And I bet they're probably protected or watched just to make sure that they don't take on goddom without a lot of responsibility.
Right.
So there probably is some secret society stuff going on to protect or at least watch all of the different bloodlines that are in mortal society. And we could have a lot of fun with that. I have a lot of secret society stuff that I would like to do in this setting.
Yeah. I mean, that would be an interesting one.
Yeah.
Who's gonna, keep track of all that, and maybe there's somebody who suspects the truth about Adala and the people there and everything like that, and they have a society that are meant to discover the truth and find out what's going on and everything like that, and so the ones who are around have to watch that to make sure they don't get, too close or whatever, as well as watching bloodlines and all that stuff. So you could have several with different purposes that would stem from this reality or this world in terms of secret society, ones with different purposes, ones of keeping the truth and whatever protected, and then others who are kind of like tinfoil hats, this is the truth. They walk among us, the Atlanteans. They walk among us,
Yeah, totally. I think that in terms of setting design, one thing we should be aware of is and I take this from experience because I've been super fascinated in secret society conspiracy stuff since I was very young, and a lot of that, and I was always like religion for me. It was always academic. Like I was just interested in the stories. But there are a lot of people that take those things very seriously and real, and a lot of it's been co-opted by Nazis, frankly.
That's true.
And so when we're in the setting construction, we need to be very cognizant of the anti-Semitism that's prevalent in a lot of these conspiracy theories, especially with the Illuminati and some of those things. And I've worked a lot in this field in terms of fiction and balancing that. But there are two things to look out for. There's the idea of the cabal and the anti-Semitic powers that be in control of governments. And the other thing is that the higher race is very prominent, and not only in these conspiracy theories and secret societies, but it's also very prominent in like Hermetic magic traditions too. Like when you get into the Victorian stuff and you get into like the Aleister Crowley stuff and you get into Golden Dawn, a lot of this stuff is like special races, pure races. That's why they use swastikas. Well, that was before swastikas were co-opted, and a lot of the runes that were used. So I really want to two things. I want to be cognizant of that and make sure we don't, use any of that really bad, ugly, horrible stuff. And also, I think there's an opportunity as writers to take that back and reform it into something that's healthy and good and interesting. And so it doesn't automatically have to be like, if you can take the anti-Semitism out, if you can take the higher race out, and we already kind of did it in a way, because usually when you talk about Atlantis stories, it's like the Atlanteans seeded civilization and they were the ones responsible for the pyramids. We've already flipped that on the head. It's like actually they were worried because pyramids were being built.
Right. They were worried because the humans were doing things and they were like,
So we want to get away from they went blasting through society, but not in a good way. It was the sea peoples and caused like the fall of the Bronze Age. So
which actually, if you think about it in bigger connotations, then that means the elder gods who had come over here for whatever reason to this dimension, the elders, they are afraid that the mortals are going to end up perhaps achieving that fourth dimension, because otherwise why wouldn't they want them to progress? You know what I mean?
Ding. Yeah, absolutely.
If that's the way you want to go.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's in mythology. What's the first thing Kronos does?
Eats his children.
He opens his eyes. It's like, oh, we have to kill all of these people.
Yeah.
And it's in Babylonian mythology too. I can't remember the name of I want to say Eru. One of the primal gods woke up and said, they're being too loud. Kill them all. The Hebrew god did it. Kill them all.
Yeah, the Greeks didn't want to give the humans fire, and Prometheus was like, no, I'm going to give them fire. And now he has his freaking liver eaten out every day.
Yeah, I love that. I love that the elders are threatened by the mortals.
Goes unpunished, I guess. And it would fit in how we feel about like the older gods and how temperament, like they have powers and they're immortal, but they've got issues. Okay. Like they come over here, I mean, hey, if somebody wanted to be like, well, what if they got forced over here because they were such jerks in the other dimension that nobody they just kicked him out of the whole dimension.
Right. It's probably just classic colonialism. Like, we're going to go take care of it. We're going to take over this. But I think that's good. I think we can take a lot of these horrible racist anti-Semitic tropes and take them back and make something healthy out of these subject matters. It'd be great to talk secret societies again without being,
right,
all wrapped up in all that bullshit. And it's something I've avoided as an author, and I don't want to avoid anymore. I think it would be really great, to bring the Illuminati into fiction, without the anti-Semitic bullshit.
Right. Yeah.
Should be able to do that,
Sweet. Sweet.
But all right. I think we crossed a lot of ground.
Stuff. I think we got some good stuff in there.
So next, I think what we should do is you and I can work on a resource book. What will become the resource document for writing in this setting, and we can kind of formalize some of this stuff.
Yep.
And to a document and give that to the community. And that will probably be Creative Commons.
Yeah.
And then we can start story building. We'll start on our first story.
Yeah. Sweet.
So Next week, I'm going to be at a game convention. If you are in the LA area, go to strategicon.net. There are amazing people behind this con. I go there with the Happy Jacks RPG Network every 3 months, basically. And we always have a table there, and we're always running games. And the Happy Jacks RPG Network full of a bunch of great people, so check them out. But anyway, I'll be doing that, so I won't be doing this.
Right.
So we'll have a week off.
Sweet.
But when we come back, I don't know. Do you want to be up first on the story?
Sure. I got a couple ideas.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. So we'll start story building. Basically, what we would like to do is, if something's going to be canon, go through the story building process, which should be done as a team. So the more people that join the Lacuna, the more they can participate in this. And it'll be a somewhat structured approach to building the story. And then like a writer's room, because this is a writer's room. So if we have a team of people looking at characters, motivations, story beats, then the story is going to be, I think, more powerful than if just one person does it. But you would be doing the writing of that story once we get the story structure in. And then while you're writing, we'll do one for me.
Right.
And then if other people want to join, they can join and pitch their ideas.
Cool.
I also, speaking of Happy Jacks, did talk to Kimmy, who is the Happy Jacks boss. She put out a game called Decuma, Decuma.
I have that.
It's a beautiful game. It's a tarot deck, but it's used for creating characters, character relationships, conflicts, and other things. So it's a really cool tool for story building and world building. So I'd like to have her on to go over Decuma, and maybe we can even play some Decuma for our setting.
Yeah.
And our stories.
Yeah. So, I have a copy, so
yeah.
I'd be prepared for that. I have the mat too. She gave me a mat for free because she's awesome. When I bought the game. So she was like, awesome. Here's a mat. I was like, oh, yay. So
that's all to come. Totally that's all to come. We have a lot to do, and I think we're in a good spot.
Yeah. Just finalize some of this stuff, and then we can have that, and then we can start on story stuff and see where that goes.
Absolutely.
Awesome.
Okay.
Well, thank you, everyone who is listening or will listen to this in the future.
We will see you in the week after next.
Week after next.
Bye-bye.
Bye.